The Beast Within wasn't just a creature feature, it was a feverish mutation stitched together from nightmares no studio wanted to claim. It emerged from rewrites, disputes, abandoned ideas, and a folklore so disturbing that even horror veterans stepped back. Production spiraled as makeup tests failed, actors cracked under pressure, and the transformation scene pushed technicians to their breaking point. Why did a modest thriller descend into one of the most chaotic shoots of early 80s horror? And why does its creature still unsettle effects artists today? These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Beast Within. Fact 1. The strangest truth about The Beast Within begins long before the cameras rolled. Rooted in a script that no one wanted to admit was inspired by an uncomfortably real criminal case. The early drafts drew from reports of an assault so disturbing that the studio insisted the writers remove any direct reference, hoping the film would bury its origins beneath layers of creature horror. Yet the traces remained in the atmosphere of dread, in the way Michael's fate feels less supernatural than inherited from something brutal and human. The rewrite process ballooned into a crisis as scenes were discarded, restored, reshaped, and stitched together without a clear anchor. Actors later recalled never receiving a stable script, pages changed daily, motives shifted overnight, and the story's moral center dissolved into ambiguity. Even the director admitted the film was chasing shadows, trying to transform a real tragedy into a monster narrative without fully understanding the ethical minefield beneath it. But perhaps that confusion is exactly why the film feels so uneasy. It carries the weight of something too real to name and too grotesque to ignore. In the end, audiences weren't reacting to a creature at all, but to the echo of a truth the film tried desperately to hide. Fact 2. One of the earliest challenges the production faced came from casting Michael, a role that required vulnerability, physical intensity, and the ability to embody a transformation that bordered on madness. The search dragged for weeks as auditions revealed talented actors unable to withstand the psychological demands of the part. Many walked away after reading scenes that described bodily distortion in agonizing detail. When Paul Clemens finally appeared, he didn't deliver a polished performance, but something raw, twitching, almost feral, leaving the room silent. The producers sensed potential but hesitated, fearing the role might damage an inexperienced actor unprepared for the extreme makeup and isolation required. Clemens himself later admitted he didn't fully understand the emotional toll until he stepped into the prosthetics, which tightened across his face like a second skin intent on suffocating him. Crew members remembered him pacing alone between takes, muttering lines, stretching his jaw as if trying to loosen something tightening inside him. That eerie tension became the foundation of his performance, a portrayal that seemed less like acting and more like a body surrendering to some unseen force. The irony is that the production worried he might be too fragile, yet fragility was exactly what made him unforgettable. Fact 3. The film's notorious transformation sequence became a battleground that nearly derailed the entire project. The makeup team was tasked with creating a metamorphosis more visceral than anything audiences had seen, even after landmark effects in films like The Howling and American Werewolf in London. Yet, unlike those productions, The Beast Within had neither the budget nor the technology to rely on. Early tests failed spectacularly as foam latex split open, mechanical rigs jammed, and the actor's skin blistered under adhesives that weren't designed for prolonged use. The team worked through nights, reshaping molds until their hands cramped, driven by a mixture of desperation and artistic pride. Every iteration brought a new problem, from facial swelling that threatened safety to hydraulic bladders that inflated unpredictably, warping the illusion into unintentional comedy. Eventually, the sequence emerged not from careful design, but from accident and exhaustion, a collage of makeup failures filmed from angles chosen to hide their defects. Viewers later praised the grotesque realism, unaware that what they saw was barely controlled chaos caught on camera. The film set out to depict a body losing control, and fittingly, the production mirrored that descent more than anyone dared to admit. Fact 4. The production's struggle with its shooting locations became one of the film's most persistent nightmares. The crew expected a quiet Mississippi town to offer stillness, privacy, and the eerie southern atmosphere the script demanded. But instead, they encountered unpredictable storms, collapsing structures, and a community uneasy with the film's darker themes. Each day brought a new logistical problem: power outages that shut down lights mid-scene, humidity that melted prosthetics within minutes, and insects that swarmed equipment with unnerving precision. The abandoned mill, central to several key sequences, deteriorated faster than expected. Rotten beams snapped under the weight of rigs, forcing the crew to rebuild supports on the fly. Even the roads leading to the set eroded after heavy rain, trapping trucks in mud and detouring actors through miles of woodland before sunrise. More than once, the director considered relocating entirely, but the studio refused, arguing that the unpredictable decay gave the film an authenticity impossible to replicate elsewhere. Ironically, the environment that caused so much frustration ultimately shaped the film's identity. Viewers often remark on the setting's oppressive mood, unaware that the sense of impending collapse wasn't crafted by design, but imposed by the land itself. Fact 5. Behind the camera, the tension between director Philippe Mora and the studio grew into a quiet but relentless power struggle. Mora envisioned the film as a tragic metamorphosis, grounded in psychological horror rather than spectacle, while executives demanded something louder, faster, and more commercially violent. Notes arrived daily, insisting on additional gore, clearer explanations, and simplified motivations, each one pushing the script further from what Mora believed it should be. Crew members recalled hushed arguments near the trailers, the director fighting to preserve moments of ambiguity that the studio feared audiences wouldn't understand. As the schedule tightened, Mora reluctantly agreed to shoot alternate versions of several scenes, creating a patchwork of tones that editors later struggled to reconcile. The friction influenced performances too. Actors received conflicting direction depending on who visited the set that day, leaving them unsure whether they were portraying a supernatural tragedy or an exploitation thriller. In the end, the final cut reflects a compromise neither side fully embraced. The irony is that the film's tonal confusion, so heavily criticized on release, became the very element that later audiences found hypnotic, as though the movie itself couldn't decide what kind of monster it wanted to become. Fact 6. The creature design process revealed another layer of chaos beneath the film's surface. Early concept sketches ranged wildly in style, from insect-inspired hybrids to humanoid mutations that resembled decomposed figures from folklore. No one could agree on what the monster should symbolize: a genetic curse, a spiritual possession, or merely a vessel for rage. Designers experimented with latex overlays, dental appliances, elongating jaw pieces, and translucent skin effects that looked convincing only under narrow beams of light. But every test came with complications. Adhesives reacted unpredictably with sweat, molds warped in the humidity, and the weight of certain appliances caused muscle strain in the actor's neck. The team debated whether to rely more heavily on mechanical effects. Yet the budget refused to allow anything beyond improvised hydraulics stitched together from borrowed parts. When the final creature form emerged, it wasn't the result of a single vision, but of accumulated failures shaping something uncanny. Audiences later interpreted its awkward movements as intentional, a reflection of a body resisting transformation. In truth, the monster's most unsettling qualities were born not from deliberate artistry, but from the production's inability to control its own creation. Fact 7. The sound design of The Beast Within became one of the film's most unexpected battlegrounds, a technical crisis that spiraled into something resembling folklore. The crew initially assumed the transformation sequence would rely heavily on visual shock, but early cuts revealed the images alone lacked the visceral impact the director needed. Every recorded growl, snarl, and bone tension sound felt artificial, either too animalistic or too mechanical, creating a strange disconnect that threatened the film's most important scene. Sound technicians spent nights experimenting with unorthodox sources, vibrating metal plates, slowed recordings of human breathing, and even the cracking of frozen branches snapped under pressure. Yet none of these attempts captured the unsettling blend of agony and emergence that the story demanded. In desperation, they recorded actors contorting their own throats, pushing their vocal cords to extremes that left some temporarily hoarse. These distorted human sounds, layered with subtle insect-like frequencies, produced an audio texture that felt disturbingly alive. The final mix unsettled even the editors, who claimed it didn't sound like a creature changing form, but like a person trying desperately not to. Viewers later described the sequence as unbearable to hear, unaware that its horror came not from monstrous invention, but from the raw, involuntary tremors of human suffering embedded in every layer. Fact 8. One of the film's lesser-known challenges was the strain placed on the editing room, where dozens of contradictory tones collided into a single, unwieldy timeline. Editors inherited reels that shifted abruptly between atmospheric tragedy and pulpy horror, reflecting the ongoing clash between the director's intentions and the studio's demands. Some scenes played mournfully, with long silences and slow, expressive performances, while others erupted into furious cuts meant to disguise technical flaws or amplify shock value. The footage rarely matched from angle to angle. Actors' expressions changed between takes, lighting shifted subtly, and continuity collapsed under the pressure of rushed reshoots. The editors were forced into a kind of cinematic triage, salvaging fragments that held emotional truth while discarding hours of footage that simply didn't fit any coherent tone. They created rhythm from inconsistency, stitching together scenes that felt incomplete but strangely compelling. The more they cut, the more the film resembled a fever dream rather than a traditional narrative quality audiences would later embrace as intentional surrealism. In reality, the film's hypnotic disorientation emerged not from artistic design, but from a desperate effort to force incompatible visions into a single beating heart. Fact 9. Marketing The Beast Within became another haunting chapter, as the studio wrestled with how to present a film they barely understood. Early promotional materials emphasized the creature, yet test groups reacted more strongly to the film's unsettling psychological tone than to its physical horrors. Executives revised strategies weekly, unsure whether to sell the movie as a supernatural thriller, a body horror spectacle, or a Southern Gothic tragedy. Posters featured grotesque imagery that the director felt betrayed the story's emotional core, while trailers leaned heavily on shock moments intentionally cut without narrative context. Behind closed doors, marketers confessed they feared the film's ambiguity would alienate mainstream audiences, but they also sensed its strangeness might attract a cult following if framed correctly. In the end, the release campaign struck an uneasy compromise, promising intensity without clarity, spectacle without explanation. Many viewers entered theaters expecting a conventional monster movie and instead encountered something far more erratic, intimate, and unpredictable. Ironically, the confusion that plagued the marketing became part of the film's legacy, drawing curious audiences who sensed the advertisements weren't telling the full truth. What scared the studio most was exactly what intrigued its future fans. Fact 10. The atmosphere on set grew increasingly unstable as the production stretched into long, humid nights, but the crew soon began whispering about incidents that felt stranger than ordinary exhaustion. Lights flickered during key emotional scenes, despite repeated inspections of the generators. Cables tangled themselves between takes, as though pulled by unseen hands. Even the sound team reported hearing faint breathing in recordings captured when no actors were present. The director dismissed these occurrences as coincidence, the natural byproduct of pressure and sleep deprivation. Yet privately, he admitted that something about the abandoned mill made him deeply uneasy. Local residents warned the crew that the land carried a dark history, marked by fires and disappearances attributed to superstition rather than fact. Whether or not the filmmakers believed these stories, the atmosphere seeped into the performances. Actors moved with a tension that didn't need directing, eyes darting toward shadows that never fully settled. The crew pushed forward, determined not to let fear dictate their schedule, but the unease became an unspoken character in every frame. What audiences later interpreted as deliberate mood setting was in truth the residue of a set that felt watched by more than cameras. Fact 11. As filming intensified, actors found themselves struggling with a psychological weight far heavier than the script suggested. The story demanded emotional extremes, terror, possession, violent metamorphosis, but the schedule left little time to decompress between scenes. Paul Clemens, whose role required repeated oscillations between fragility and eruption, described feeling as though his identity blurred with Michael's, the line between character and performer eroding with each take. Other cast members echoed similar sentiments, recounting dreams filled with distorted faces and bodies twisting in unnatural rhythms. Some blamed the makeup sessions, which required hours of isolation under blinding lights, the prosthetics tightening across their skin until speaking felt like breaking through a shell. Directors attempted levity to relieve the tension, but the tone of the film was too weighty, the themes too primal, for simple distractions to work. Even crew members not appearing on camera began reporting heightened anxiety, a sense of dread that lingered long after the day wrapped. Though no one admitted it openly, the production seemed to generate its own oppressive gravity, drawing everyone into the psychological turmoil meant only for the screen. The resulting performances carried an authenticity that critics praised, without knowing the personal cost behind them. Fact 12. Throughout the shoot, the special effects crew wrestled not only with technical limitations, but with an ongoing debate over how far the film should push the boundaries of bodily horror. Some members believed the transformation sequence should evoke sympathy, presenting Michael as a victim trapped in a fate he never chose. Others argued for a more brutal depiction, one that emphasized the monstrous nature of what he was becoming. This creative divide manifested in the design process. Certain prototypes highlighted expressive eyes and trembling movements, while others featured exaggerated mutations meant to shock viewers. The conflicting visions created endless delays as the team iterated between designs that reflected tragedy and those that embraced terror. Tempers flared during late-night work sessions when prototypes collapsed or failed under lighting tests. Yet the struggle ultimately shaped the final aesthetic, merging vulnerability with grotesque distortion in a way neither side initially envisioned. Viewers later debated whether the transformation elicited fear or pity, unaware that this ambiguity was born from artistic disagreement rather than deliberate symbolism. What began as conflict became the film's defining tension, a reminder that horror often emerges from unresolved questions rather than definitive answers. Fact 13. The creation of the film's most haunting audio element, the creature's anguished cry, unfolded through a process that blurred the line between performance and self-inflicted torment. The sound team initially attempted to build the vocalization from animal recordings, combining wolves, boars, and distorted insect hums. But every prototype sounded either too familiar or too theatrical, lacking the uncanny terror that the transformation demanded. In frustration, technicians began experimenting with human-produced sounds, asking actors and crew members to push their voices to unnatural registers. These sessions grew increasingly intense as participants contorted their throats, forced air through clenched teeth, and produced guttural tones that scraped against the limits of vocal endurance. Some left the booth trembling, eyes watering from the strain, unsettled by the primal noises they had summoned. The final audio blend layered these human cries beneath subtle mechanical vibrations, creating a hybrid sound that felt both sentient and suffering. When the editors first reviewed the mix, several reportedly asked whether the recording should be toned down. Concerned audiences might find it too disturbing. Yet the director insisted on preserving its raw edge, believing the cry captured the essence of the narrative, a human soul being torn away one fragment at a time. The irony is that the most monstrous sound in the film emerged not from special effects, but from people confronting the darkest corners of their own voices. Fact 14. The film's wardrobe department faced unexpected challenges that revealed just how demanding physical transformation scenes could be. Outfits designed for simple continuity became unusable once prosthetics and mechanical rigs expanded, tore, or distorted the actors' bodies during critical sequences. Shirts split prematurely along seams not meant to break, pants shredded unevenly, and jackets intended to convey subtle distress instead disintegrated under the strain of swelling appliances. The team resorted to creating multiple layers of reinforced garments, each tailored to specific stages of Michael's metamorphosis, but humidity and rapid shooting schedules made these efforts nearly impossible to maintain. Continuity became a puzzle of matching frayed edges, dirt patterns, and sweat-stained fabrics across takes filmed hours or even days apart. One wardrobe supervisor later confessed that they often patched garments moments before the camera rolled, hoping the repairs would hold long enough to capture a single usable shot. These frantic adjustments, meant to conceal flaws, inadvertently contributed to the film's grounded realism. The gradual decay of Michael's clothing mirrored the deterioration of his identity, reflecting a transformation that refused to remain confined to the makeup chair. What audiences interpreted as deliberate symbolism was, in truth, the wardrobe team racing against entropy on a daily basis. Fact 15. The emotional intensity of the film's climactic scenes placed extraordinary pressure on both the cast and the cinematography team, who had to capture performances teetering between terror and tragedy. The director aimed for a visual language that conveyed internal collapse through subtle movement and shadow, but the limited equipment forced the crew to improvise constantly. Dolly tracks wobbled over unstable ground, lenses fogged in the oppressive heat, and lighting rigs flickered as humidity seeped into cables. Despite these challenges, the cinematographers pursued shots that emphasized the claustrophobic unraveling of Michael's world. They framed his face through fractured windows, filmed reflections that distorted his features, and used creeping zooms to mimic the sensation of a consciousness tightening around itself. Actors responded to this visual environment with heightened vulnerability, often delivering their most powerful performances when the technical setup seemed close to failure. In several instances, the camera captured unplanned moments, shifts in expression, trembling hands that enriched the final cut with raw authenticity. The filmmakers later acknowledged that the scene's power came not from flawless technique, but from the collision between ambition and limitation. The beauty of the climax lies in its imperfection, a testament to a production that transformed constraint into emotional resonance. Fact 16. The Beast Within faced its most daunting obstacle after completion, when censorship boards across multiple regions expressed unease with the film's blend of sexual violence, body horror, and psychological torment. Many censors argued the narrative's central premise, an attack leading to a monstrous inheritance, blurred ethical boundaries in ways mainstream audiences were unprepared to confront. Scenes involving transformation, especially those that emphasized internal rupture and involuntary metamorphosis, were deemed too graphic for younger viewers and too unsettling for general release. The studio submitted multiple cuts, trimming frames of exposed musculature, bone distortion, and the creature's unnatural emergence. But complaints persisted. Some territories refused classification entirely, effectively banning the film until further edits could be negotiated. This prolonged battle exhausted the producers, who feared the delays would destroy the film's commercial momentum. Critics later speculated that the controversy overshadowed the narrative's tragic undercurrent, framing it as shock cinema rather than a hybrid of horror and Southern Gothic myth. Ironically, the bans and warnings only heightened curiosity among genre fans, who sought out the most forbidden versions they could find. In trying to suppress the film's intensity, censors inadvertently amplified its legend. Fact 17. The initial audience reactions during test screenings revealed a tension that mirrors the film's fractured identity. Some viewers were drawn to the tragic arc of Michael's unwitting transformation, responding emotionally to his struggle against a fate imposed long before he understood it. Others reacted primarily to the visceral spectacle, laughing nervously at moments intended to evoke dread. The tonal shifts, born from creative disagreements behind the scenes, created a dissonance that divided spectators almost immediately. Studio executives panicked as comment cards reflected confusion. Was the film meant to be horrifying, tragic, or unintentionally comedic? The director maintained that the unease was intentional, a deliberate attempt to reflect the instability of Michael's internal world. But audiences conditioned by more straightforward creature features found themselves unsure how to categorize what they had witnessed. Over time, this ambiguity became one of the film's defining strengths. Viewers who initially dismissed the film revisited it years later, discovering layers of emotional complexity that weren't visible in the shadow of its effects-driven marketing. What once appeared to be tonal inconsistency now reads like the portrait of a story unraveling from within, mirroring the metamorphosis at its core. Fact 18. Though The Beast Within struggled at the box office, its afterlife in video stores cemented its status as a cult artifact, a film discovered not through hype, but through whispered recommendations and unsettling cover art. Movie renters in the 1,980 seconds often selected titles based on imagery alone, and the film's stark, distorted creature face stood out among more polished offerings. Those who took the risk found a narrative far stranger than expected, a blend of regional folklore, body horror, and emotional melodrama that defied easy categorization. Discussions about the movie circulated through horror magazines, late-night television hosts, and fan conventions, where devotees celebrated its unrefined ambition. Many argued that its imperfections made it more memorable than contemporary releases with higher budgets and cleaner storytelling. The film's willingness to lean into discomfort, embracing awkward pauses and uneven pacing, gave it a raw authenticity that resonated with audiences seeking something outside mainstream formulas. Over time, the film gained recognition not as a failed experiment, but as a singular vision caught between eras too strange for its time, yet perfectly suited for the emerging appreciation of unconventional horror. The very qualities that pushed viewers away on release eventually pulled a new generation toward it. Fact 19. The film's transformation sequence continues to ignite debates among horror scholars, not because of its technical innovation, but because of how deeply it disturbed viewers long after more polished effects entered the genre. Critics frequently point out that the scene lacks the sleek precision of its contemporaries. Its textures appear uneven, the swelling unpredictable, and the grotesque distortions almost too raw to be intentional. Yet these irregularities form the very core of its enduring power. The transformation feels less like a controlled special effects showcase and more like a body convulsing in protest, resisting the shape it is being forced to take. Scholars have proposed that this visceral quality stems from the limitations of the era colliding with the filmmaker's ambition to depict pain without the filter of stylization. Viewers reported feeling unsettled, not simply because the sequence was graphic, but because it conveyed a sense of bodily betrayal, rarely explored so explicitly. Modern audiences accustomed to CGI often find the analog imperfections even more disturbing, as though the scene captures something unpredictable and alive. The irony is that what some initially dismissed as amateurish craftsmanship became one of the film's most studied and psychologically potent elements. Fact 20. Among horror enthusiasts, The Beast Within occupies a strange position often mentioned alongside seminal transformation films, yet rarely granted the same prestige. Comparisons to The Howling or An American Werewolf in London highlight its shortcomings: limited budget, uneven pacing, and a narrative that wavers between tragedy and exploitation. But what sets the film apart is its willingness to embrace contradiction, merging regional Gothic atmosphere with body horror in ways that feel neither polished nor predictable. Instead of crafting a monster with clear mythology, the film presents a creature whose origins are murky, tied to human violence as much as supernatural inheritance. This ambiguity unsettles viewers who expect defined rules, leaving them with questions rather than closure. Scholars argue that the film's refusal to commit to a single interpretation curse, biology, or myth has fueled its longevity, inspiring discussions more nuanced than those surrounding technically superior films. Over time, The Beast Within has come to represent a kind of cinematic misfit, flawed, intense, and strangely unforgettable. Its legacy lies not in perfection, but in the uneasy space it carves between genres, a reminder that some monsters endure precisely because they cannot be neatly explained. Bonus fact: long after production wrapped, rumors circulated about a sequence that never made it into any official cut of The Beast Within, a scene so unsettling that even the crew refused to keep still photographs of it. According to scattered testimonies, the sequence was filmed during the final week of shooting, when tension and exhaustion had reached a fevered pitch. It was meant to depict Michael caught between forms, a moment of paralysis where neither human nor creature could fully claim him. The prosthetics for this partial transformation were experimental, constructed from layers of gelatin, latex, and mechanical veins that pulsed unpredictably. Several crew members later admitted that the effect looked disturbingly lifelike, as though the actor's skin were attempting to detach itself. When the scene was played back in the editing room, a heavy silence reportedly fell. The transformation appeared too real, lacking the cinematic distance that allowed audiences to process horror safely. Editors argued that the footage would overwhelm the narrative, detracting from the emotional arc rather than enhancing it. Others claimed the sequence triggered a visceral reaction that bordered on nausea, creating discomfort not through violence, but through the uncanny sense that the body on screen was genuinely failing. The director ultimately chose to cut the scene, fearing it would overshadow the film's intended themes. Yet whispers of its existence persisted, fueling speculation among fans who believed the missing footage represented the film's truest expression of tragedy. Whether the sequence was destroyed, misplaced, or quietly archived remains unknown. What is certain is that its absence continues to haunt the film's legacy, suggesting that the most terrifying moment The Beast Within ever produced is the one no audience has been allowed to see. Tell us in the comments which moment from this story unsettled you the most, and whether you see The Beast Within as a misunderstood tragedy or a fractured monster tale that became something stranger than its creators intended. Every interpretation opens a different doorway into its myth, and we want to hear where you stand. If you'd like us to explore the hidden history behind another forgotten film, or a star whose legacy holds more shadows than answers, let us know below. Until then, thank you for watching, and stay curious about what lies beneath the surface.